The tale started with the main character clutching his hand and panting heavily, standing alongside his team in front of the Demon Lord. He believed this was their final chance to corner the Demon Lord once and for all. Among them was Kai, a member of the weakest class, the Black Mage, who pressed his injured hand against his chest. His thoughts drifted to the girl and memories he held dear, imagining her holding a beautiful bouquet. Sweat trickled down his face profusely. In that moment, Kai transformed into the strongest class. Warrior Ares swiftly dodged a magic projectile aimed at his leg and yelled, "Kai, you must stop the Demon Lord!" Kai roared, "Blood blindness!" A magical seal emerged beneath him, from which numerous hands sprouted. He extended his arm and shouted, "Blind the Demon Lord!" The hands surged forward, seizing the Demon Lord. Kai bellowed, "Now, Ares! He had to finish off the Demon Lord!" A sinister grin spread across the warrior's face. Gripping his sword with both hands, he charged forward, declaring they would meet again. "Brother." With that, he drove his sword through Kai's chest along with the Demon Lord's. Confused, the protagonist wondered why he had been stabbed along with the Demon Lord. They collapsed to the ground. Ares spread his arms wide and declared smugly, "I've crushed the Demon Lord." Now he proclaimed himself the true hero. Kai turned desperately and asked, "Why?" Ares retorted, "Why?" With another mad smile, he covered his face with his hand and spat, "A damn black mage as an older brother! You shouldn't be so arrogant and try to taste glory. Bastard!" Kai cried out, "What is he talking about?" The highest class, the righteous eye on rest, spread his arms wide and stated, adjusting his glasses with a smirk, "Something as evil as a black magician as a partner for the upper class. Even if it was a hard test sent by God, it was too reckless." Kai screamed, "What is he talking about? I use black magic and have always helped our group." The ultra-rare class magic sword woman, Mirza, laughed and pointed at him, saying, "Help them? He really is too cocky. He's the weakest class idiot." For 5 years, he had worked diligently. There was only one step left. When they turned 15, everyone received a special role from God known as the class. On that day, he became a black mage, a dark magic class despised because its members were closer to demons than humans. Consequently, Kai endured humiliation. It was considered the weakest class among other malevolent forces, often labeled a class of losers by people. Someone placed her foot on Kai's head and smiling remarked that it was absurd to treat a member of the weakest class as human. She added that his survival would reduce her share, so he should already be dead. Eris grabbed the sword embedded in both Kai and the Demon Lord's chest and said, "Now, for him." As he began to pull out the sword, the black mage screamed in agony. In that moment, Kai thought of Colette. He remembered when Colette's father had declared that the engagement between a black mage and a righteous class member was unsuitable and would be broken. Colette had protested loudly, shouting, "No, father, this is too much. I want to marry Kai." He looked at her pleadingly, and her father allowed her to say goodbye to him. Desperately, Kai said, "It can't be." Colette reached out her hands towards him, but guards restrained her. She closed her eyes, then removed her bracelet and placed it in Kai's hand, urging him to take it. Tears filled her eyes. Staring at the bracelet in shock, Kai listened as she instructed him to take good care of it. "Goodbye," she whispered. A tear slid down her cheek, and she promised they would surely meet again. Back in the present, Aris continued laughing maliciously. He approached Kai and whispered in his ear that Colette had ordered him to kill Kai, just as his father had commanded. His father, the strongest knight of the Holy Kingdom, had trained many brave warriors. As the head of the respected Austin family, his father was the strongest knight in the Holy Kingdom, having trained many brave warriors under his tutelage. As the head of the respected Austin family, Austin had once stated that he would not tolerate a vile black mage within his household. However, if Kai participated in subjugating the Demon Lord, he could return to the Austin family. Confused, Kai knelt before him and asked about enslaving the Demon Lord. His father assured him that he would handle the engagement with Kai's childhood friend, Colette. Shortly after, Colette was imprisoned in a room in the royal palace, where she was used to create a great protective wall around the holy city. If Kai defeated the Demon Lord, Colette would be freed, and they would marry, living happily ever after. Kai had put forth tremendous effort to regain his father's trust and bring Colette back, and finally he succeeded. He believed that his class level had reached a strength stat of 999, but still, in the present, Harry smiled maliciously and said to Kaiser, "It's a shame, brother." Then spreading his arms wide, he laughed loudly and added, "Because of the invincible younger brother, the elder brother was killed by the Demon Lord." Tears streamed down Kai's face. In the end, his father and Eris had merely been using him. With bitterness, he muttered, "Damn." Holding the sword, Ares told Kai to stop being annoying. Pointless blackmail. He shouldn't worry, they were taking good care of Colette, so Kai should already be dead. If he had known it would turn out this way, he would have just taken Colette with him, and they would have run away together. He wouldn't have cared about what others thought or common sense. He would have simply enjoyed their happiness. In that moment, the bracelet Colette gave him shattered, and her words echoed in his mind. Kai, please, you shouldn't die in my arms. He felt a pang of sorrow and wished to see Colette one last time. After some time, birds perched on the windowsill of the room where Kai lay. Colette asked, Kai, how long is he going to sleep? The protagonist slowly opened one eye, then suddenly sat up and asked in surprise, breathing heavily, his face covered in sweat. He looked at the girl and asked in shock, Colette? I thought you were imprisoned in the castle. Why are you here? She rushed to him and asked what had happened, noticing he was drenched in sweat. He placed his hand on his chest and wondered, I don't have any wounds. Then confused, he shouted, What the hell? Colette smiled, holding a towel, and said, Good morning, Kai. She began searching for something in her bag. Kai looked at her and sensed something was off. Colette should be in her 20s by now, but she appeared so young. Embarrassed, she covered her mouth with her hand and asked, Come on, Kai. Are you still not fully awake? It's such a beautiful day. Are you okay? The black mage laughed and apologized, saying, You're right. I probably haven't fully woken up yet. As he spoke the last word, worry crept into his voice when he noticed his reflection in the mirror. Surprised, he thought, Am I also looking? Colette, embarrassed, said, Kai, you should finally wake up. Then she smiled and spread her arms wide. Today is the class determination ceremony. I'm so excited. Beads of sweat trickled down the black mage's face as he asked in confusion, Determination ceremony? The determination ceremony is today, she confirmed. Excitedly, he grabbed her by the shoulders and asked, What year is it? She looked at him in surprise. He continued, I'm not a black mage yet, she asked, puzzled. He thought to himself, Is all of this a dream? Colette pushed him away, covering her mouth with her hand in embarrassment, and said, You're too close. He replied, I know, I'm sorry. The black mage pondered this feeling. No, this isn't a dream. Could I have traveled back in time? He stared at his hand in astonishment. There was a mark on his hand. Looking at his hand, he cried out in surprise, Is this a class crest? Why does my class already have a determination? Kai gritted his teeth and thought, This can't be happening. If I really went back in time, my quest wouldn't have started yet. But I already have a class crest before the selection ceremony. Why? He opened his status. A board appeared in front of him stating that his class was Black Mage level. No skills were listed, no difference from before he died. Then he noticed the last line, which said his status was blocked. Seeing this for the second time, his mouth dropped open in surprise and he asked himself again, What? He thought that inexplicable things were happening one after another, but some things were obvious. Right now, he was in the past. Was this some kind of magic? No, this was beyond any existing magical powers. No one here could do such a thing. Not even the Demon Lord. He remembered hearing a voice before he passed out. She pulled him out of his thoughts by shouting, Chi-Chi, you have to listen to her. She took his hand and asked, Is everything okay? And what's with this coat of arms? A bracelet fell to the floor. She looked at it and said that she thought she had lost this bracelet, but it was here. Then she picked it up. Memories flashed through Kai's mind. He got up from the bed and took her hand, thinking, I see. The bracelet, he thought. This is Colette, her power as a righteous one. Then he laughed loudly and said, Yes, it was her. He hugged her tightly and said, If we knew how all of this happened back then, we could change the future. She told him confusedly to wait. She is a black mage. The protagonist thought, That's imprisonment in the future. And me, I'm killed. I would change it. I won't let her go again. He said determinedly, I won't let you get away again. Colette sighed embarrassingly and then asked, What are you saying? He let go of Colette and stood in front of her, laughing awkwardly and said, I'm sorry, I was just sudden. She looked away, embarrassed, and said, Well, it's not that I didn't like it, but it was so sudden. You surprised me. We are engaged, so even if you want such things, he asked her. Yes. She looked down and said, It's nothing. Kai scratched his head and said, An engagement. When his father finds out that he is a black mage, some people say they are closer to demons, therefore an engagement. Colette interrupted him and said, Kai, do you know? I think there is no big difference between black mages and other classes. After all, you are still you. Kai looked at her with confusion and thought, Colette is still Colette. She hasn't changed at all. She didn't change her mind when she found out he was a black mage. Even though everyone hated him, she always extended her hand to him. He doesn't believe in people, but with Colette, it's different. As expected, Colette and him. Kai then said, Colette, you shouldn't be surprised by what I'm about to say. She asked in surprise, What happened? He took her hand and said, I came back from the future 5 years ago. The future? Me? No. The me in front of you now is a black mage with level. She covered her mouth with her hand and asked in surprise, From the future? Level 999. He said, I will prove it to you. After that, he closed his eyes, and energy began to concentrate around his outstretched finger. Then he said, Rise from the ground, Hawkman. A demon appeared with a roar. Colette screamed in fear. No way, a demon! Kai held his hand aside and controlled the magic seal. He confirmed her words and said, I summoned it from hell. Black mages of level 999 can make contracts with high-level demons like an archdemon. He thought that since this contact was made for the first time, it was still in effect, proving that he could use all his knowledge of black magic without problems. And most importantly, it proved that his first experience was real. He looked at Colette and thought they wanted to see each other in real life. He and Colette had turned a dream into reality. In that case, he needed to hurry. No, he just didn't have time. Because today is the class selection ceremony. The Demon Lord would be born today. Kai held his hand outstretched in front of the huge demon. Colette fell to the floor in fear. The demon said, Lord Kai, please, you must give me your orders. Colette asked fearfully, Kai! He stood in front of the demon, then turned around, scratched his head, and apologized for scaring her. But he thinks it is obvious now that he is a level 999 black mage. She smiled and confirmed his words. She did not doubt his words at first. He would never lie to her, right? He said, embarrassed. Colette? She stood up, took his hands, and said, This is incredible. I heard that even 10 holy knights cannot defeat such a demon. Kai said, Black mages are not able to master other skills, but they can use all types of magic. They can also use a lot of powerful spells. She said, That's cool. He said, You're talking cool now. He closed his eyes and told her to listen carefully. She looked at him seriously. And he said, Today you will get the righteous class, and Ares will get the warrior class. She asked in surprise, Ares? Another warrior was born in the Austin family? At that moment, Ares looked into the room and asked, Did you call me brother? Kai looked in his direction and said his name. Colette said in fear, Oh, Ares, what happened? He walked into the room and said, Oh, and what about the demon? He's not here anymore. The demon? What are you talking about? Okay, never mind. They were talking about him, weren't they? The warrior candidate is gossiping about others behind their backs. Colette shouted, He wasn't talking about you behind your back! Ares placed his hand on the hilt of his sword and said, Colette. He moved closer to her and whispered in her ear, Instead of this guy, why shouldn't you be with me? Kai pushed his younger brother away from Colette and told him to leave. He insisted, Go right now. Ares began to draw his sword and asked, What if I say I don't want to? Kai covered Colette with his hand and silently stared at his brother. She asked in confusion, Kai? There was a magic seal near the black mage's leg. The warrior remarked, His hands are shaking. Ares sneered, What a weakling, Kai, that's enough. The brothers clenched their teeth in anger, glaring at each other. They were interrupted by a man who entered the room and apologized. He said, So he was here. Lord Ares, the Duke is calling for you. The warrior sheathed his sword and turned around, saying, I'm coming. Kai looked at Colette and asked if they should go too. She replied, Yes. After that, they left the room and sat opposite each other. Ares watched them irritably. Sometime later, they were walking down the street. Kai looked at Colette and said he felt some nostalgia from the city and the people around him. She smiled and said, Yes, it has been a long time since you've been here. Someone shouted, Master Kai. The black mage asked, confused, Master Kai? That's still the case? The man held a clay pot in his hands and said, Master Kai, thank you for getting rid of those bastards back then. Kai thought, after all, no one knows that he is a black mage. Colette smiled and said, Kai, see how happy everyone is to see you. That's because you've always worked hard. After some time, he suggested continuing their conversation. She agreed, and he said that soon, Ares would receive the warrior class at a ceremony, but then he would make a big mistake. Because of Ares, the demon lord Griselda would be born, and within 3 days the Holy Kingdom would perish. She said fearfully. He looked at the residents and said, In fact, the area will remain, but some people will be killed. To protect the rest of the holy city, the Great Barrier will be erected to maintain it. You will be imprisoned in the royal palace. Moreover, he would receive the class of black mage and be expelled from the Austin family. They would be separated. She shouted excitedly, What did you say? I don't want this. I always want to be with you. He widened his eyes in surprise, and then put his arm around her shoulders and asked, Okay, will she go with him? He proposed to stay together. She blushed in embarrassment and said, Kai, is this? He is proposing to her. Then she suddenly leaned down to hug him and said that she was so happy. She proposed to always be together in his first life. He thought he had been stupid. If only he had done that from the beginning. He hugged Colette tightly and thanked her. It would have been better if he had hugged Colette like that much earlier. After a while, he took the reins of the horse Colette was riding and said that she should hide in his village for a while. That way, she would escape the disasters that the war would bring. She would reach the village in about 3 days. Colette put on her hood and asked if he would come with her, and then put his hand on his chest and said, I will stop Ares and prevent the birth of the demon lord. She said, I understand, as expected of Kai. Colette told him to try his best to protect everyone. He agreed with her and then returned, waving at her and saying, she would wait for him. He shouldn't be late and should pick her up quickly. He should promise her. Kai smiled and said, I will solve everything and come for her right away. He promised. Colette was wrong. It was an ugly act for the benefit of everyone. It was all for him. He would save Griselda from the clutches of Ares and build friendly relations with the evil spirits. Cooperation with demons was necessary to face the consequences of the future. He realized the truth in the battle against the demon lord. Griselda said that she finally met the enemy, Sasha the warrior. He was the one she would never forgive. Ares thoughtfully scratched the back of his head and asked, he's from the past. Yes, something like that happened. No one could have imagined that the harbinger of peace, the warrior, would be the cause of the destruction of humanity. If he saved Griselda, his friend Sasha, perhaps he would have stopped the birth of the demon lord. After a while, Kai concentrated energy in his hand, and then opened his eyes and said, now is the time to start a rebellion against this fate. At this time in the dungeon, Ares whipped straight and asked, has she changed her mind yet? He asked for the last time. Griselda spat out blood and clenched her teeth. Ares said, Griselda, you must kill Kai. She asked indignantly, he wants me to kill my twin? How disgusting. I don't take orders from dirty idiots like him. He slammed the whip in front of her leg and said, it seems she doesn't know what happens when someone disobeys orders. A bead of sweat ran down his face. She squeezed her eyes shut, noticing magical symbols on her shackles. Handcuffs to contain magical power, she thought, putting her hand to the shackle on her arm and saying, if it weren't for this, I would. Ares asked what she was going to do. He leaned towards her and told her to know her place. You're my slave, he said. He gritted his teeth and told her to go kill Kai. Right now, there is a prophecy that a warrior will be born today. It will probably be this idiot. I'm sure Kai and Colette will get married after this. And that's the worst part. A vein popped on his face. And he shouted, I will not let this happen. Colette and the title of warrior should be mine alone. Warrior, endless combat power, just an attribute of this class designated by God as the strongest. Being special is the privilege of a warrior. Entering a house without asking, stealing, damaging property. All of these are the privileges of a warrior approved by the law. He laughed madly and shouted, isn't this better? No one can go against the only being capable of defeating a demon lord. If I become a warrior, I can have any woman I want. A drop of drool dripped from the corner of his mouth, and he said, damn, I want to be a warrior. If only this weren't all for him. If she kills Kai, I will definitely obtain the status of a warrior. Today is my last chance. Preserve the trembled. But she said that this is not a noble reason at all, just because he wants women. Bastard. He got angry and hit her, shouting, you bitch, you should just go and kill him already. What do you think I bought you for? The vampire clenched her teeth and shouted, stop underestimating me. Who do you think I am? I am an honorary vampire. The blood of a demon lord flows through my veins. Even if you kill me, I will not follow your orders. Ares said, you are just useless trash. I spent all my money on you. After that, he took out his sword and said, then let it be as you wish. He shouted, I will kill you. You should regret your choice. Griselda closed her eyes and clenched her teeth. Sasha shouted, stop, please. You must stop. She is begging you. He looked at her. And Griselda excitedly shouted, Sasha, are you awake? You must be quiet. Sasha said, no, I will not. Even if it is Miss Griselda's order. Mr. Ares, I will go and kill him. So please, you must release Griselda. Ares put his foot on her face and asked, are you saying that you will go and kill him? She's a low-class demon. Chi is the precious child of the Austin family. He kicked her in the face, and she screamed in pain. Griselda, screamed Sasha. He is ugly. Ares smirked and grabbed Sasha's face, asking, is a maid so important to you? She looked at him in fear, and he said, I find you funny. There are always demons like you, demons who act like humans. His father did a lot of things like that, too. He put his sword to Sasha's neck and made a small cut. Griselda's face was covered in sweat. He said he would give her one chance. She must say it. I will obey Master Ares. He spread his arms out to the sides and said with a smile, her insignificant essence, his Master Ares, his loyal slave. She should just repeat after him. Even a stupid demon like her can do that, right? Griselda looked up at him and said, such humiliation. Ares put the sword back to Sasha and said, her precious servant will soon die. Griselda clenched her teeth in anger, and the warrior swung his sword. She shouted, okay, that's enough. Her body trembled, and Sasha shouted, no, Lady Griselda, she must not worry about her. She said, Sasha, I need her. Then she closed her eyes and said, I will obey Lord Ares. Sasha shouted, Lady Griselda, she cannot betray her honor like that. Griselda looked at her in confusion and said, Sasha, Ares indignantly asked, "They are bitches! Stop ignoring me!" He walked up to them and said, "Okay, I understand. Die." He swung his sword, but the door suddenly opened. He looked at it and asked in surprise. Then his eyes widened in fear. Powerful energy was directed towards him from the magic seal that Kai created. The girls looked at it in surprise. Everything around was covered in smoke. Kai approached Griselda. Kai shouted, "No need, Ares!" The warrior turned around and indignantly asked, "What?" Kai concentrated the energy in his fist and swung. It approached the warrior. His face was covered in sweat. And he asked in surprise, "Kai?" There was a magic seal on the dark mage's fist. He hit Ares, and he flew into the wall from the blow. The stone wall was covered with cracks. The warrior screamed in pain. Blood flowed from his mouth. The girls looked at it in confusion. Kai approached them and said, "Thank God I made it." Ares sank to the floor, unconscious. Griselda asked in confusion, "Who is he?" He asked, "Is she Griselda, and she wants to become the Demon King?" She asked, "The king?" He looked at the chained demon next to her and asked, "Is that Sasha?" Then the demon said, "Lady Griselda." The protagonist said, "Ares, what a bastard he is." Griselda looked at him seriously and asked, "How did you know our names?" Kai told her to wait first. He raised his hand and used recovery magic on Sasha. The girl was covered in his energy and her wounds disappeared. She said, "This is dark magic." Griselda screamed in surprise. The wounds were instantly healed. Kai stretched out his hand to her and said, "I will heal you too." He thought that Griselda was his former enemy, but now in front of him was not a king who had killed many people. Now she was a little girl who had been made a slave. He also used to kill on her behalf. Her body was covered in his energy, and after that, he used a spell to break the shackles. The shackles on the girl's hands and feet were destroyed. Griselda looked at her hands in admiration and said, "They're gone, and my wounds too, and that vile magic of slavery." She put her hand to her cheek and said, and in just an instant, she said, "Sasha." Tears appeared in her eyes. She hugged the demon. Sasha said, "Mrs. Griselda." She hugged her back. They shouted, "Hooray! Finally we're free!" Kai looked at them. Sasha burst into tears and said, "I thought we were finished." When our territory was taken away by Elsa the Demon Slayer, the protagonist asked, "Elsa, is that really the red-haired magical sword woman?" Griselda turned to him and asked, "Do you know her?" He said, "Yeah, I know her." The girls looked at him furiously, and Sasha shouted indignantly, "Is he really in cahoots with her?" The black mage clenched his teeth and shouted, "It wasn't so." Elsa destroyed many demon lands, gathering thousands of adventurers. Elsa said that God is money. Her goal is money. She sold kidnapped demons and accumulated wealth for herself. She was against the demons. For this, she was supported by humans and also due to her fame and youth. She was taken into the adventure team. He does not want to have anything to do with her. Griselda looked at him seriously and said, "She has not yet thanked him. Human, she needs to thank him deeply." "What is his name?" He said, "I am Chi Austin." She said, "Chi, I see. So he is his older brother. Did he want to become a hero? Why did he decide to save us demons?" "Can they help him?" Griselda asked in surprise. "Help!" He showed his hand and said, "I am nobody to human society." She looked at his hand in surprise and pointed her finger at it and shouted, "This is a dark mark. He is a dark mage." Sasha said, "I see. So he uses dark magic, but that's weird. How can he use such powerful magics at such a young age?" Griselda said, "I really can't believe it, even though he saved us." She thoughtfully put his hands to his chin and asked, "But what is his goal?" Sasha looked at the vampire and said, "Lady Griselda." She said, "I don't mind, I believe him." Sasha said, "Ares told Chi he wants to kill him and get the title of hero." The dark mage shouted in confusion, "Oh, come on." He recalled the moment he first desired to kill him. Griselda raised her index finger and remarked with admiration that she naturally refused him, reasoning that such a great king wouldn't aid a scoundrel. Sasha smiled with admiration. Griselda turned to Chi and expressed that, without his help, she would have lost a valuable friend. She remembered her transformation into a demon lord and thought, "I see." He realized that Griselda, consumed by despair and resentment, had killed many people, and it was all because of him. Approaching his brother, he extended his hand toward him, gathering energy and contemplating whether he should kill him at that moment. He recalled his brother's belittling words and thought, "He belongs to me." Then he remembered the joyful Colette and mused, "Colette? That's right. If I kill him, it will devastate her." Griselda walked up to him and asked, "Kai, what are you planning to do?" Closing his eyes, he thoughtfully placed his fingers on his chin, then struck his forehead, releasing a cloud of magical energy. Griselda observed it with confusion. The energy cloud began transforming into a lizard and crawled into Ares' mouth. Sasha leaned closer to observe and remarked that it had entered her mouth. Griselda inquired if it was a curse. The protagonist confirmed her guess, commending her insight. Ares' face bore marks. Griselda turned to Kai and asked what kind of curse it was. Kai replied that it would make his brother's life a living hell. Sasha's life would also be tormented, Kai added, explaining she would understand later. Griselda sat next to Ares, extended her hand to him, and admired the powerful magic. Sasha indignantly declared that not even demons could wield dark magic with such mastery, finding it increasingly mysterious. The protagonist awkwardly muttered, "Well," before glancing at the girls. Their clothes were tattered, and he hesitantly asked if he should help them dress. They became flustered and replied, prompting him to use dark magic, summoning a dark closet. Kai reached into the open portal and announced that he had found clothes to cover them. He suggested they probably change somewhere else. Later, the girls stood by the mirror. Griselda raised her hands and said, "Sasha, you should change your clothes." Sasha gestured to Kai and said, "Mr. Kai, please leave the room." He smiled awkwardly and resolved not to peek. He noted that it was nearing noon, and Ares would soon receive the hero class. All damage, except the curse, would be healed by his resurrection skill. Only the holy sword remained. Griselda peered into the room and called for Kai. She bashfully lifted her dress hem, revealing her outfit. Smiling, she confessed it was her first time wearing something like that. He gave a shy smile and said that the outfit suited her, Griselda. Her face flushed with embarrassment, and she expressed her gratitude. Sasha approached them and exclaimed, "How dare you dress Mrs. Griselda in a maid outfit?" The vampire turned to Sasha and remarked, "Oh, Sasha, it suits her." Sasha happily thanked her. Kai interrupted the conversation, requesting a moment to speak. As they looked at him, he explained that he had something important to share. A short while later, they sat facing one another, and he revealed everything to them. Griselda cried out in shock, "Stop! He came from the future? She's the Demon King? Is he serious?" Kai added that there was more. Ares killed him, and his team of adventurers had also betrayed him. Clenching his teeth and lowering his head, he stated that this was why he trusted neither people nor heroes. Sasha recalled his recovery magic and remarked that if he truly came from the future, it explained his exceptional magic skills. She also believed it was likely true that Lady Griselda became the Demon King. Smiling, she reasoned, "Well, yeah. If he wanted to deceive us, he'd have come up with a more elaborate lie by now, especially since I owe him my life." Kai smiled awkwardly, and Sasha asked what they should do next. He confidently declared that they would destroy Elsa. Griselda widened her eyes in surprise and asked, "Really?" She then described how Elsa had enslaved people and stolen all the fossils, leaving them in torment. She lowered her head sadly. The protagonist placed his hand over his chest and vowed to restore everything. She gazed at him admiringly and asked if he would truly save the people. He nodded in agreement, and she exclaimed, "Thank God." Overcome with emotion, she began to cry, saying she could now face her father, who had left them. Sasha, with tears in her eyes, added, "Yes, Lady Griselda." Kai clenched his fists on his knees and asked, "In exchange, could they allow him to live there with them? After all, they were engaged." Griselda clarified, "Engaged?" Realizing his intentions, she thought, "I see, so that's why he wanted my help." Deciding she had no objections, she added that she was to receive the title of Holy Maiden that day. She suddenly shouted in protest, "Stop! Holy Maiden! If they brought a Holy Maiden here, she could be persecuted by the Holy Kingdom." Folding his arms, he confidently reassured them to rely on him. If the Holy Kingdom decided to attack, he would handle it. At that moment, a vase fell from the table. He turned toward the noise and, without hesitation, grabbed the girls and flew out of the building through a large crack in the wall. Once outside, he gently lowered them to the ground. Griselda, still surprised, asked how they had moved so quickly. The building caught fire, and Kai said, "It seems the time has come. We need to save ourselves." Sasha grabbed Griselda by the shoulders as she clenched her teeth in anger and asked, "Why? Why so soon?" Ares emerged from the flames with a smile, laughing loudly, and asked mockingly, "How are you doing, brother? What a face you're making," he added. Spotting the mark on Kai's hand, Ares widened his eyes in surprise and asked, "Is that the mark of a dark mage?" He sneered, "What a pity. And you hope to become a hero with such useless magic?" He stared at the mark on Kai's hand, clenching his fist. Kai, examining his own hand, thought, "This is a mark. My resurrection skill is already active." He then declared, "After all, I've become a hero, Ares." Ares grinned maniacally and shouted, "I've won! I've beaten you! Now I'll be the main one." Griselda muttered bitterly, "And this freak's a hero? It couldn't get worse." Ares, placing his hand to his face, smirked and said, "I smashed you pretty good, didn't I? You should thank me." Extending his hand, he remarked, "I never thought I'd get this." Raising his hand high, he shouted, "Come, Holy Sword of Randall!" His body erupted with energy as bright lightning streaked through the sky. A sword appeared in his hand, and he looked at it, declaring, "This is the sword of a hero. Proof that I'm now the main one." Griselda, confused, asked, "Is that the sword?" Sasha commented on the immense magical energy emanating from it, while the vampire added that even Kai might not match it. Kai clenched his teeth and thought, "Randall's sword, the very one that killed me the first time. Ares placed his hand on his side, smiled, and said mockingly, "You can ask for mercy now, brother Kai," pointing the sword at him. Grinning, Ares taunted, "Don't you understand the difference in strength? Dark mage! I'm a hero! No one can defeat the sword with the strongest magical energy," he shouted. "Repent for daring to go against justice." Kai extended his hand and said firmly, "Stop talking, attack already." "I'll show you hell," he added. A vein bulged on Ares' face as he asked indignantly, "You'll show me?" The dark mage beckoned him with a gesture, stating, "I'll break your sword in half. If my dark magic fails, I won't step outside again." Ares shouted, "Interesting. Looks like you've got a death wish." Concentrating energy in his sword, Ares charged forward, yelling, "I'll show you!" The dark mage dodged the sword and thought, "Indeed, the magical energy is strong." Continuing to evade, he mused, "These techniques alone won't defeat me." Ares stopped abruptly and shouted in confusion, "How is he dodging everything?" Kai thought to himself, even though he's a hero, his strength is far below the first level. Suddenly, a glowing board appeared before Kai's face, displaying the message, "A limited hidden class has been received for Second Life." Kai read it in surprise, wondering what this hidden class was. A dark star? Still puzzled, he reflected, "What is this? I've never heard of it before." Ares swung his sword overhead, charging at him with a shout, "Die!" Meanwhile, Kai recalled the explanation. The Dark Star is a special class granted only to those who perfectly mastered dark magic in their first life. With the Dark Star class, Kai thought, one can access and remember numerous dark skills. However, it came with a catch. Evil deeds accumulate evil points, which can then be exchanged for skills. He thought to himself, "So I need to commit evil to earn skills? How do I feel about this?" As he deliberated, another board appeared, congratulating him. Staring at it in disbelief, the board proclaimed, "Great deed achieved." It awarded him 1,000 points, leaving him confused. "I didn't do anything," he thought. The board clarified, "You saved the demon and confronted the hero." Kai smirked and thought, I see. If this counts as evil, then the rest will be simple." A skill selection screen appeared before him. Spotting the demon sword summoning skill, Kai said, "This one will do." Spending 1,000 points, he acquired the demon sword summoning skill. Ares, swinging his sword again, shouted, "Take this! Why are you so calm?" Kai appeared behind Ares and said, "You're too late!" Ares turned in shock, shouting, "What?" As Kai stretched out his hand and summoned the demon sword, the ground beneath them cracked, and Ares yelled in astonishment, "What's happening?" From the splitting earth, a sword emerged and landed in Kai's hand. Staring at it, he realized, this is the Demon King Griselda's sword, Delphin's sword. It grows stronger with dark magical energy. At my level, this weapon is perfect. The warriors around him shouted in confusion, "What? What kind of sword is that?" Kai admired the weapon, its dark energy coursing through him. He thought, this sword absorbs magical energy and channels it flawlessly. The girls stared in shock. Prince Elda screamed, "That's my father's demon sword!" Sasha stood speechless, her mouth agape. Ares, overhearing, asked in disbelief, "A demon sword? Is that true?" Kai lifted the demon sword above Ares' head. Ares noticed his hair falling, realizing something was amiss. He stammered, Where are you aiming?" The buildings behind Ares crumbled, consumed by fire as Kai's attack tore through them. Ares turned and saw the destruction, stunned by the collapsing structures and raging flames. Kai gazed at the sword in satisfaction and mused, "It seems I can't fully control its power yet." Ares, panicking at the devastation, shouted, "What is this? Is this even possible? Is this truly the power of the demon sword?" Kai frowned, thinking to himself, "This isn't entirely true. My magical energy is simply concentrated into pure destructive force." Ares suddenly had a realization and shouted with a smug expression, "Wait!" Raising his head and shielding his forehead with his hand, he began to laugh hysterically. "You scared me for a moment," he exclaimed. "Don't you know the law of the cycle of elements?" He grinned and explained. "The holy sword belongs to the element of light, while the demon sword is of darkness. When the holy sword strikes darkness, its power multiplies exponentially." The sword in Ares' hands began to overflow with energy as he shouted, "Watch this! My sword of light will obliterate you!" Kai analyzed the situation carefully and thought, "This is the strongest sword of light I've ever seen. What am I supposed to do against that?" Ares smirked confidently and declared, "I'll show you the true power of the holy ball." His body radiated holy energy, glowing brightly. Kai stood firm and said confidently, "Go ahead, attack me." Ares, now enraged, charged at Kai, shouting, "Die!" He unleashed his most powerful attack, the final blow spell. A massive stream of energy flew directly toward Kai. Ares laughed triumphantly and roared, "This is the power of a hero!" The enormous, radiant magical cloud of energy hurtled toward Kai, glowing intensely. Sasha shielded her eyes from the blinding light while struggling to stay upright, covering Griselda in the process. Griselda, leaning forward in shock, shouted, "That magical cloud is enormous! It's impossible to dodge! If it hits Kai, even he—" To everyone's astonishment, the immense magical energy cloud stopped just short of Kai. It detonated in a massive explosion. The blast left a gigantic crater in the ground. Ares stared at the empty hole. Stunned, Sasha gasped in disbelief. Both she and Griselda struggled to process what they were witnessing. Ares exhaled deeply, a triumphant smile spreading across his face. Laughing maniacally, he shouted, "Not even a speck of dust remains of him." He celebrated loudly, declaring, "My time has come! The money, the land, the glory, all of it is mine now." Turning toward the girls with a predatory grin, he licked his lips and added, "And the women too, Colette, Griselda, all mine." Griselda collapsed to the ground, overwhelmed by despair, unable to accept that Kai had lost. Ares stared at the girls hungrily, muttering that he couldn't let anyone escape him. Sasha embraced Griselda protectively as they huddled on the floor. Just as Ares advanced toward them, Kai suddenly appeared behind him. Smirking, Kai thought, "This is the moment I was waiting for." Ares turned, confused, and stammered, "What?" Kai asked mockingly. "Did you really think you had won? A second before the explosion, I used dark magic. Instant movement." Ares stumbled back, his expression one of utter disbelief. "How?" he thought, realizing he had underestimated his opponent. Kai observed that while the demon sword couldn't directly harm the holy sword, Ares' final blow had temporarily neutralized its magical energy. He recalled that in his first life, he had noticed this vulnerability of the holy sword multiple times. Ares glared at his weapon, realizing the energy had drained from it. Sensing his opportunity, Kai launched an attack, shouting for the hero's sword to vanish from existence. Charging his sword with dark magic, Kai struck, determined to destroy it. The holy sword cracked under the force and shattered into two pieces. Ares stared in disbelief and cried out, "That was my holy sword." Suddenly, an unseen force hurled him into the air and slammed him onto the ground with a resounding crash. Kai caught his breath and muttered, "It's clear now. This sword truly lives up to its name. It consumes an immense amount of magical energy. I can only wield it for 15 minutes at most." He concentrated and thought, "If I had used this sword at level 1, I'd be dead instantly." What a troublesome skill this Dark Star is. A soft chime echoed, and a system window appeared, congratulating him. He had destroyed the holy sword and defeated the hero, earning 3,000 points. Griselda screamed his name with joy, asking if he was alive. "You won! You defeated Ares!" she cried. Sasha clasped her hands together in pride, beaming. Kai allowed himself a brief moment to savor his victory. Later, they stood over Ares' unconscious body. Kai noted that he was still breathing. Griselda pondered aloud, "How long until he wakes up?" Kai replied, "Not anytime soon. Resurrection is only possible once per day." A cracking sound came from Ares' head. Griselda gasped and screamed, realizing that the curse had begun to manifest. The curse spread from Ares' head to the class mark on his hand. Kai explained, "When Ares intends harm, his mark of light transforms into a dark mark. That's the nature of this curse." As the curse completed, the once honorable hero mark became a dark mark. Kai remarked, "The hero mark symbolizes honor, while the dark mark signifies disgrace. Ares is now a false hero, and the Austin family will lose all their glory." With satisfaction, Kai declared this to be his revenge, not just for Ares, but for his father, who had stolen his life. Breaking the holy sword and cursing Ares ensured that Ares' hero status was effectively dead. Hearing a commotion behind him, Kai turned and asked, "What's all this noise?" Griselda suddenly flew at him, catching him off guard, calling him Lord with unrestrained enthusiasm. Kai, confused and a little alarmed, stammered, "Why, Lord?" Griselda shouted with excitement. "You broke the holy sword! You defeated the hero! You are now the savior of demons!" With pride, Griselda declared, "Undoubtedly, you are destined to become the new demon king." Kai broke out in a cold sweat, nervously asking Griselda if he was really destined to become the demon king. Meanwhile, in a serene forest by the river, a horse drank peacefully. Colette sat nearby and wondered aloud how Kai was faring. The demon, in its small form, reassured her not to worry, adding that Kai was likely resisting the role of demon king. Sitting on a rock, Colette expressed her hope that Kai was unharmed. "No one compares to Mr. Kai," she said softly. Stroking the small demon cradled in her arms, she admired his size, marveling at how tiny he had become. The demon, a bit flustered, urged her to calm down. Flying out of her grasp, the demon hovered above her, explaining that his small form was merely a temporary mode for travel, assuring her of his protection. Colette clapped her hands in delight, commenting on how adorably he flapped his wings. Suddenly, the demon noticed something in the distance. The holy knights from the holy capital are approaching. We must hide, he warned. Colette, confused, asked why. The demon explained that they were likely searching for her relentlessly, especially now that the strongest holy maiden had gone missing. Alarmed, Colette nodded in agreement. She anxiously murmured, Kai, please come quickly. Back at the demon's stronghold, Griselda was fervently insisting that Kai was the demon king. Kai, still in disbelief, stammered, Why me? The demon king? When the girls agreed with Griselda, Kai stepped back, waving his hands defensively. He pleaded for calm, explaining that wielding the demon's sword didn't automatically make him a king. Griselda dismissed his protests as nonsense. Crossing her legs with a smirk, she confidently declared, Only someone with the Demon King class can summon the demon's sword. That's the proof. Sasha chimed in, pointing out that Kai not only broke the holy sword, but also defeated the hero, something no prior demon king had ever accomplished. You're the strongest demon king we've ever had, she said with awe. The girls stared at Kai expectantly, awaiting his response. He internally panicked, realizing they truly believed he was the demon king. Thinking it over, Kai considered that being accepted by the demons might actually work in his favor. With a serious expression, he announced, Yes, I am the demon king. Griselda beamed, explaining that to fully claim the title, he only needed to perform one final task, entering into a servant contract. Kai, taken aback, asked, What contract? Griselda tilted her head, surprised. Don't tell me you don't know about this? She asked, incredulously. She began explaining, The servant contract is a special skill exclusive to the Demon King. Anyone entering the contract gains a class from the Demon King and becomes significantly stronger. But in return, they pledge absolute loyalty. Kai raised an eyebrow. Servants? There's no such skill in my abilities, he replied. Opening his system window, he began searching for more information. Kai suddenly noticed a new skill available for him to acquire. It was labeled Servant Contract, costing 300 points. The skill's condition was to destroy the hero's holy sword. Kai realized that after the recent battle, he had fulfilled the requirement. Now, he could see the available classes to offer with the contract. The Demon Captain class boosts the subject's attack by 12 times and grants one skill from the Demon King. You can recruit up to 16 magic captains. All subordinate stats increase by 5 times. The Demon Warrior class grants 2 skills from the Demon King and allows for the creation of 8 warriors. All stats are doubled. The Heavenly King class provides 3 skills from the Demon King and limits the creation of 4 Heavenly Kings. Kai understood this system and realized that this is why Demon King's warriors were so powerful. Kai read a note stating that the contract is valid only with mutual consent. Classes can be changed or removed, but anyone who opposes the master will be killed. He was shocked and exclaimed, Will they be killed? He then asked, Is this a real contract? Griselda confirmed, explaining that her father's will dictated allegiance to the new Demon King. She proudly told Kai that she trusted him and had nothing to lose. Sighing, Kai agreed with her. Clenching his fist, he declared that since they had agreed, he would proceed. Griselda confirmed their agreement, and Sasha said it was an honor for them. The girls knelt in submission, and a notification appeared confirming the civil servant contract. Kai extended his hand with the mark and told Sasha that he was granting her the Demon Warrior class. Sasha was surprised by his choice and asked again if he was really giving her the warrior skill. Griselda placed her hand on Sasha's shoulder and explained that demon warriors were chosen not just for strength, but for loyalty. Sasha, hopeful, called her mistress. Kai looked at her and asked, Well? Sasha closed her eyes. She named her masters and confidently declared her loyalty, asking Kai to make her a demon warrior. Kai agreed. He placed his hand with magical runes before her and granted her the demon warrior class. A mark appeared on her hand. Sasha felt a surge of strength, stating that she could feel power flowing through her. She glowed and became filled with energy. Griselda was amazed and shouted that this was the servant's contract in action. Kai was surprised and thought about what it meant to be a demon warrior. Griselda addressed him as master and confidently asked for the power to protect the demon race, requesting the Heavenly King class. Griselda swore her loyalty to him. Kai recognized that this was the same Griselda who could have become the Demon King herself, and he realized there was much to expect from her. Looking at his hand, Kai never imagined that the day would come when he would form a servant contract with the Demon King. The protagonist agreed and placed his hand with magical runes before her head, stating that he was granting her the Heavenly King class. Suddenly, a pillar of dark energy rose above the houses. Kai and Sasha gazed at Griselda in shock. He felt fear. Rosalba radiated an overwhelming dark aura. Sasha called out her mistress's name to make sure she could hear her. Griselda raised her fist in triumph, shouting with joy that she now possessed part of her master's power. She had become the Heavenly King, determined to make Master Kai proud. The The protagonist gazed at her with admiration, recognizing that this was indeed the Demon King, Griselda. Sasha congratulated her mistress on receiving the class. Griselda, feeling proud, declared that they had become subjects of Mr. Kai, the one who defeated the hero. Sasha reflected on it and said that she would now be of use. Griselda, with newfound understanding, shouted that she had grown stronger. Together with their master, they would create a new world for demons. The girls embraced each other in joy. Sasha agreed with Griselda. Kai watched them, realizing that by defeating Ares, he had gained the Demon King as his ally. Fate had shifted. However, a strange noise interrupted his thoughts. He turned around to see his father's army. His father, enraged, unsheathed his sword and yelled, demanding to know how his foolish son would explain this divine night. The Heavenly Knight, GIS commander, angrily demanded to know how Ares could have lost. He stood ready for battle, questioning why Kai was allied with the demons. He insisted that Kai answer him. Kai shielded the girls, positioning them behind him. Griselda, irritated, asked who the confident figure was. Kai answered calmly, stating that he was the leader of the Holy Knights, his father. Near the ruined buildings, the army discovered Ares' body. After examining it, they realized he was still alive. Kai remained in his stance and turned to his son, asking why he had not even attended the class promotion ceremony. What was he up to? Kai revealed that he was a dark mage. His father was visibly shocked. He furiously asked, "Wasn't he supposed to be a hero?" Kai laughed and showed the mark on his hand, stating that his son would now become the Demon King. GS began to sweat nervously. He pointed at Kai and shouted that the mark was dark, confirming that Kai was indeed a dark mage. The men around them called Kai a fool, shouting that he truly planned to become the Demon King. His father lamented that Kai had abandoned the pride of the Austin family and forsaken a sense of justice. Kai clenched his fist and repeated his question, "Justice?" He confidently stated that he had witnessed enough of his father's brand of justice during his childhood, how he threatened and tortured others. The protagonist reflected on how his father concealed the birth of the Demon King from everyone, then banished his son and ordered his death. He declared that for a heavenly knight, only his own ego mattered. If this was his father's version of justice, he was perfectly fine with becoming evil. Gies pointed his sword menacingly at him, warning that his son would never live as he once did with this new class. Kai told him not to worry, adding that GIS was no longer part of the Austin family. He snapped his fingers and declared that GIS was now banished. Flames erupted behind GIS and his army. GS turned around, panic setting in. It wasn't just one building on fire. All the buildings in the area were burning. GIS screamed in disbelief, asking what was happening. His army shouted that things were getting worse, with flames spreading from one house to the next. The townspeople began to panic, shouting that a fire had started near them as well. They realized the barn was on fire too and needed to escape quickly. GS turned to his son, furious, and demanded to know what he had done. Griselda asked her master when he had prepared for this. Kai explained that while he had been searching for her, he tried to make sure no one was harmed. A notification appeared, congratulating Kai for setting fire to his parents' house, deeming it a perfect crime. He earned 500 points. The protagonist grinned, feeling fortunate. This system was perfect for his revenge. He decided to acquire a skill, such as Darkness Enhancement, which boosts dark power by 1% per level. Jais shouted angrily at his son, furious at his actions. Kai calmly stated that the Austin family should be erased. This was his version of justice. GIS shouted loudly, ordering the army to kill his son, declaring that he was no longer his son. The army closed in on the protagonist, attempting to strike him with their spears. Kai casually walked away, unleashing dark energy. The dark energy from his back obliterated the soldiers who dared to attack him. He told them to rest. GS charged at his son with a sword. GIS shouted at his son, warning him that he wouldn't escape the consequences. To him, they were nothing more than pawns. Kai replied that he already knew, gathering dark energy in his hand and summoning his weapon. The sword he used to defeat the hero materialized in his hand. The protagonist faced off with his father in an intense sword battle. Both of them gritted their teeth, struggling to maintain their stance. The tension between them was palpable as they fought for dominance. Kai shouted that now the sword was in his son's hands, signaling the shift in power. Suddenly, his hand shot up uncontrollably. He couldn't comprehend what was happening. With swift precision, Kai swung his sword. In one decisive motion, he severed his father's hand. Kai screamed in agony as his sword hand dropped to the ground. A soldier rushed to the commander, handing him the fallen sword. GS groaned in pain, shouting at his son that this was truly a demon sword. Had he really chosen to renounce his humanity? GS composed himself and, sitting confidently, activated the special magic of the Heavenly Knight's restoration. But to his surprise, his hand failed to heal. Kai remarked that he finally realized the magic of eternal blood had been cast on him, preventing any healing. He had used the highest curse magic at level 850 to sever his father's hand. Not even the Holy Virgin's magic could restore him. Kai stopped the bleeding, telling his father to accept this as his final duty. Grasping his own wound, Kai shouted in triumph, saying that he had just received a class. How did it feel? He added that a warrior who had lost their dominant hand was as good as dead. Now, his father's justice was powerless. Jayas cried out his name in confusion. The protagonist remembered terrible moments from his first life when his father had caused him suffering. He closed his eyes and declared that his father had killed him. GS, still confused, asked what he meant, but then something clicked. The protagonist received a congratulatory notification. He had reduced his own father to an invalid, earning 500 points in the process. GS noticed something and let out a malicious laugh. He declared that everything was clear, if not Kai, then Ares. He shouted, realizing that Ares had become a hero, a saint. His predictions had always been correct. The protagonist remained silent and waited. Kai grinned with satisfaction, ordering the soldiers to cast restoration magic on his father and defeat the evil dark mage along with the hero. One soldier, his hands trembling, pointed at Ares and said something was wrong with him. Jis looked at his son, still confused. Suddenly, he saw something that made him shout in disbelief. Ares also bore a dark mark. Had he received the dark mage class as well? This couldn't be. Ion's predictions never failed. Kai agreed, realizing that the saint's predictions were indeed accurate. Ares had truly become a hero, but he had simply covered his light mark with the mark of darkness. Ion posed the main threat to Kai's plan. Since Ion was a member of the hero team, his unique skill, prediction, could foresee the next 7 days. Kai knew he needed to eliminate him as quickly as possible. GIS, upon realizing this, sank into despair. Kai asked if his father intended to banish Ares now, considering he now had both heirs of the dark class. With that, the family's pride would be ruined. His father shouted in fury, wondering what would become of the Austin family's honor. A soldier turned to GIS and asked what should be done with Mr. Ares. Should they treat him? GS screamed, "No, we'll throw him out like trash. He's a stain on the family. No one of the dark class should remain. They must be exiled." Kai exhaled, thinking his father was a fool. Meanwhile, Ares, a hero, lay before him, and now Ares would lose his status as an aristocrat as well. The protagonist realized his goal had been achieved. There was nothing more left for him to do here. He told his father he was leaving. GAS, still kneeling, turned to his son and asked if he was seriously siding with the demons. Would he stand with them too? Kai nodded, saying at least he could trust them. The protagonist thought he could only trust Colette. He approached the girls and suggested they leave the place. They agreed, with Griselda complimenting him and Sasha praising him for being great. Kai thought that as he looked at them, it seemed the demons had pure hearts. For someone who truly understood people, their hearts appeared to be too innocent. The protagonist bid his father farewell, and they exited the gate where a guard approached them. The guard asked if something had happened inside. Kai told the guard to inform everyone not to see him off, and that anyone who followed him would be killed. The guard nervously agreed with every word, clearly frightened. Kai thanked him before leaving. In an instant, all 3 of them disappeared, leaving the guard stunned. The guard, in shock, muttered that the master had just vanished. The protagonist and his subordinates appeared in a forest near a river. The girls were astonished by the sudden shift. Kai turned to them, smiling, and said they needed to move on. Sasha looked around and remarked how convenient the magic was, noting how far they'd already traveled. Griselda, impressed, commented that Kai had shown his father his place and praised him for it. The protagonist thanked them. Griselda asked if they could go further into demon territory. Kai agreed, saying they should hurry, but first they needed to reach LAX village to gather supplies. Suddenly, the protagonist had a thought and said he'd strengthen the girls a little, just in case. Griselda, surprised, asked loudly if they were going to become even stronger. Kai placed his hand on the girls and said he was giving Griselda and Sasha a 10th-level dark magic boost. The girls gasped from the surge of strength. Griselda cried out, feeling something warm pass through her. Sasha screamed that the power was too overwhelming for her. Kai thought one of the abilities from the subject contract was the ability to give a subject any of his skills. He wouldn't lose the skill, so it was more like sharing than giving it away. The protagonist scratched his head and apologized to the girls. The girls, still catching their breath, stuttered in thanks for the strength he had given them. Surprised by their reaction, Kai asked if they needed more rest. They all sat on a nearby stump to recover. Kai suddenly remembered the bracelet and began searching for it. He thought Colette should be safe. She had given him the bracelet as a talisman during his first life. Although the bracelet was broken, it still radiated strong magical energy. And thanks to it, the protagonist realized he could use that skill. He searched through his skills and found it. The skill was item appraisal. The cost of the skill was 500 points. It allowed him to determine the price, ownership, and usage of any selected item. Kai analyzed the bracelet. The appraisal revealed that it was a time bracelet. Inside it was a prayer for a second meeting with a lover. It contained the magical power of the Holy Maiden of Time. The bracelet increased the owner's magical protection by 5%. Kai's eyes widened, and he thought, as he had suspected. Thanks to the bracelet, he had been able to be reborn. The protagonist recalled fragments of his first life, clenched his fist around the bracelet, and thought that it was because of Colette that he had destroyed the Austen family that separated them. He believed he could change the future now. Together, they would be happy. Kai realized that Colette was the holy maiden of time. Did she also have a hidden class? So she wasn't just a holy maiden? He decided he shouldn't jump to conclusions, and instead should meet her as soon as possible. Griselda, looking at her master with confusion, asked what had happened. Kai simply answered that it was nothing, and led them on their way. The girls happily agreed and followed him. The protagonist told Colette to wait for him in a dark room lit by a lantern. Someone was kneeling in front of Jonah. Jonah praised the knight and dismissed him. The knight agreed and left. Jonah, smiling maliciously, said that he had finally found the holy maiden of time. Later, in LAX village, St. Jonah and his subordinates were interrogating the villagers. He stood over a tied-up man with a book in the river. One of his subordinates pointed a sword at the man. Jonah bowed before him and began the interrogation. After the questioning, several people sat on the street, visibly shaken. St. Jonah declared that they had discovered the approximate location of St. Colette, and there was no point in continuing the interrogation. He thanked them for their help and instructed his subordinates to erase their memories with magic and set them free. The subordinates acknowledged the command. The people were confused and shouted, asking if they were really going to let them go. Were they truly going to erase their memories? One man yelled, pleading not to cast such dangerous magic on them, as he had heard it could drive people insane. Jonah adjusted his glasses and, with a smirk, said that since the man was being so selfish, he would do him a favor. He instructed his subordinate to kill the man. The man began to sweat at Jonah's words. Jonah turned to the rest of the prisoners and asked if anyone else was also against the magic of oblivion. The crowd, trembling in fear, all denied it. Jonah laughed and commented on how wonderful it was that there was only one. In the forest near LAX village, frightened crows suddenly flew out. Colette, breathing heavily, was running from her pursuers. Two of St. Jonah's subordinates were chasing her. The girl gasped for air. St. Jonah raised his hand, speaking confidently that the Pope's prayers would certainly reach the saint. She would be saved. Jonah thought it didn't matter to him whether she became a hero or a demon king. All he needed was a second life. Only the Holy Maiden of Time could fulfill his wish. His prediction skill told him that Colette, the daughter of the monkey, wouldn't escape. One of his subordinates turned to him and asked why he was letting her escape. St. Jonah replied that it was strange. She must have thought they were bandits because of the darkness. He doubted she could sense anything with her skill. The girl ran toward a building and glanced around. She realized she had run into a dead end. Her pursuers caught up to her. The demon shouted that if only he had noticed sooner. Colette paused for a moment and said they could probably talk instead of fighting. Among her pursuers was St. Jonah himself, who addressed her by name. He expressed his joy at meeting her and gave her a bow, trying to get a good look at her. Colette, dryly and sternly, addressed him by name. Suddenly, St. Jonah noticed a mark on her hand and wondered if she could really be the Holy Virgin of Time. Colette wondered aloud what their purpose was, since they were making such a commotion. St. Jonah smiled and explained that they had come for her. Thanks to a prophecy, they knew a new demon king had appeared. They wanted her to set up a holy barrier around the capital. The girl scowled and refused, saying it was his duty. She pressed her fist to her chest and declared that she had nothing to fear, as a true hero named Kai had prevented the birth of the demon king. St. Jonah looked at her, confused. Colette asked if he hadn't predicted that a demon king would be born today and kill half the country's population. But since it hadn't happened, that meant Kai had figured it out. She laughed and said, "How did you know my prediction?" Confidently, she explained that Kai had told her about it, though he probably wouldn't believe her. But Kai had come from the future and saved many people today. He was the real hero. St. Jonah laughed hysterically and exclaimed, "What's going on?" He screamed in disbelief, asking what it meant for someone to live a second life. He asked if this Kai was perhaps the son of the Austen family. Colette confirmed it. St. Jonah said that, unfortunately, he had almost killed his brother with his dark powers. He had gone against his own family, setting his house on fire and fleeing. Colette screamed in disbelief. "He set it on fire? That can't be true!" St. Jonah shouted that she was lying. His predictions were always correct. He insisted that Kai Austen was the evil demon king, but he hadn't expected the girl to side with him. Colette screamed in fear. Jonah pointed at her and ordered that she be tied up. He realized that Kai Austen living a second life was a grave threat. He also realized that he and Colette had a special connection. He thought that if he took her hostage, Kai wouldn't harm them. And if everything went smoothly, they could extract information from him. Colette pleaded for them to wait. Jonah continued to believe that he would succeed. as the Holy Maiden of Time held the key to the second life. He imagined a day when he would rule the world. Suddenly, a demon appeared behind the girl, transformed into his true form, and roared at them. Jonah's subordinates screamed in fear. The demon attacked them with his claws, slicing their bodies. One of the subordinates stammered, addressing St. Jonah. The demon, standing behind Colette, held a flame in his hand. Colette remarked that she thought they could talk, but everything seemed to be as Kai had predicted. St. Jonah screamed in disbelief, saying that this couldn't be. This was the demon. Colette asked if Jonah was responsible for the corruption of the werewolf, suggesting he confess his sins. Jonah screamed in fear, apologizing. He said that everything would go as she said. The demon threatened to silence him permanently, stating that Jonah intended to escape with lies. Colette asked the demon to stop. The demon turned toward her, looking at her. She stood beside him, watching. St. Jonah screamed that the emperor had forced him to do all of this. He didn't want to be involved. But if the demon king had never been born, there would have been no reason to chase the girl. Colette asked if this was true. Jonah confirmed his words. Jonah bowed his head, smiled eagerly, and swore to his words. Colette accepted his confession and asked that they drop all weapons and surrender. Jonah agreed, but he had one request. His squad had suffered casualties due to the demon's attack. Colette grew concerned and screamed for him to heal them quickly. St. Jonah forbade her, saying it was his fault and that he would deal with it himself. Jonah took out a bottle of potion and began feeding it to the wounded man. He urged him to drink the recovery potion. Jonah added that the potion was sweet and delicious, encouraging him to take his time. He laughed in the girl's face and shouted, "She's so gullible!" The subordinate started coughing. The girl was confused and didn't understand what was happening. The demon screamed in frustration while the boy coughed. The subordinate began to transform, crying out in pain, thinking he was about to explode. Colette started to panic. The subordinate grew massive, like the demon, and tested his new strength by gripping the enemy's fist. St. Jonah shouted that he had leveled up. "How is she?" "Level 800 ah." The subordinate's eyes widened, exclaiming that it was a miracle he could resist the demon. The demon screamed in frustration, hinting that he still had a trick up his sleeve. But the fight wasn't over. They collided in battle. Colette began to retreat in fear. St. Jonah yelled that she had been trapped. He opened his book and declared he would ensure the girl didn't escape, using the light magic holy arrow. The demon saw the attack. St. Jonah smiled, feeling victorious. The arrow sped toward the girl in an instant. Colette tried to dodge it. St. Jonah called her name and guided the arrow's path. At the last moment, the demon blocked the arrow, taking the blow to protect her. The girl screamed his name in sorrow, unable to comprehend why he made such a sacrifice. The demon cried out in pain. The subordinates looked on in horror. St. Jonah mocked Colette, calling her gullible. He couldn't believe a hired demon would stoop so low to act like a loyal servant. The knights bowed and activated their magic. Jonah shouted for the holy knights to move forward. They obeyed, claiming that their actions were for the sake of justice. They charged, swords glowing with magical energy, ready to finish off the demon. Jonah adjusted his glasses, thinking that light magic was powerful against darkness. His subordinates hacked the demon into pieces. Jonah began to wonder if maybe they were going too far for a demon associated with darkness. The demon screamed in pain, calling their actions cruel. Jonah laughed, mocking the demon, and asked, "After such an act, you still call yourself a saint? What a shame. Isn't it true that being placed in this position makes me justice?" Jonah taunted. The demon exhaled deeply, calling Jonah a pitiful little human. The demon collapsed, muttering Colette's name and urging her to save herself. His body then vanished. Colette watched in horror, unable to process what had just happened. She was in shock, unable to believe the demon's sacrifice. The mutated subordinate stood tall, admiring his victory over the demon. Suddenly, the subordinate's veins bulged, and blood poured out from numerous cracks in his skin. The subordinate screamed in agony as he crashed to the ground. He looked at his master with hope, begging him to restore him. Jonah told him to stay away, disgusted by his state. The subordinate, covered in blood, was confused and in pain. Colette rushed over and tried to heal him with her hands. She promised she wouldn't abandon him and would heal him right now. The subordinate looked at her, tears in his eyes, admiring her kindness. He thanked her, calling it sweet. He couldn't understand how he could have hurt her. Colette continued to heal him, tears streaming down her face. The subordinate apologized, but something inside him exploded, and a large burst of blood shot out of his mouth. The blood splattered across Colette's face and hair. Jonah approached and commented on how ugly the scene was, saying that things needed to change. Colette realized what had happened and asked if he knew this would happen. Jonah, holding an open book, confirmed her suspicion. He explained that the potion had been used to enhance magic in exchange for strength. Colette couldn't hold back her emotions and began to cry. She said Jonah had called Kai the Demon King, but in the end, it was Jonah who turned out to be the true enemy, worse than a demon. Jonah closed his book and apologized, but his words were empty. He sat down and hugged the girl, thinking she might find comfort in it. Colette, however, was still crying. Jonah stood up and informed his men of an emergency. He shouted that the girl was under the protection of a demon, a subordinate of the Demon King. He claimed she had likely been brainwashed. Jonah's shout echoed, and he turned to the girl with a smirk. Using the holy chain skill, he bound her, preventing her from escaping. Colette begged him to stop, but Jonah shouted for her to listen to him. Kai was their enemy, and he forbade her from contacting him. Colette disagreed, but Jonah warned that if she resisted, the chains would tighten even more. The girl insisted that Kai could not be their enemy. Jonah laughed, knowing she loved him. "What wonderful feelings," he mocked. Colette bent over, crying. Jonah mused on how long her feelings would last, predicting they would turn into nothing but pain for her. He laughed maniacally, staring at the book. Colette's mind was consumed with thoughts of Kai. The frightened subordinate turned to Jonah, saying this was too much, given how merciful the girl had been. Jonah shot him in the forehead with an arrow, silencing him. He laughed, calling the fallen man another heretic. Colette, horrified, declared that this was too much. She believed that God saw everything and would punish Jonah. Jonah laughed at her, mocking her belief. He told her that it was God who had made him a saint and that he was justice. She would be the one punished. The chains continued to tighten, and Colette, remembering Kai, whispered an apology to him, tears flowing. Jonah laughed, admiring himself, and declared that if they used it, the Demon King, living a second life, would no longer be a threat. The fun was about to begin. He told the holy maiden to wait for him. Meanwhile, Cal walked through the forest, holding sticks in his hands. He wondered if his beloved had reached the village safely. His thoughts were on her. The protagonist arrived at the house and called out, announcing his return. Inside, they were preparing a delicious-smelling soup with vegetables and meat. The girls happily informed him that dinner was ready. Griselda praised Sasha, saying the food looked absolutely delicious. Kai inhaled the savory aroma and commented on how wonderful the house smelled. His frequent use of instant movement had left him famished, and he couldn't wait to taste it. Suddenly, he felt a sharp pain in his hand. The mark on his hand flared up, causing him to drop the sticks onto the floor as he groaned in pain. The girls noticed his discomfort and began to express concern. Kai glanced at his hand, realizing that the magical energy he had given to the demon had returned to him. The protagonist processed the situation, understanding that the demon had been defeated. He reached out through telepathy and contacted the demon. The human responded, saying he was listening. Kai asked what was wrong with Colette. The demon apologized, revealing that the girl had been kidnapped. Kai was stunned by the revelation.